The letter arrived with the morning train, carried from the station to the small post office of Silver Reef, Utah, in the summer of 1879. Nora Norton clutched the envelope in her trembling hands, staring at the neat handwriting that would determine her fate. After 2 months of correspondence with a rancher seeking a mail-order bride, she'd finally received his response to her confession, the truth she couldn't keep hidden any longer. "Miss Norton," the letter began in a sharp, angular script. "I regret to inform you that your condition makes you unsuitable as my wife. I require a woman who can bear children to continue my family name. Our arrangement is hereby terminated." The words blurred as tears welled in her eyes. The stagecoach that had brought her to this dusty mining town was long gone, and with it, her hopes for a new beginning. Nora had spent nearly all her savings on the journey west from Boston. At 26, she had faced the cruel reality of her barrenness after a childhood illness left her unable to bear children. When her parents died of influenza last winter, leaving her with mounting debts and no prospects, becoming a mail-order bride seemed her only option. Now, standing in the dusty street with nowhere to go and only $8 to her name, Nora felt the weight of desperation pressing down on her shoulders. "Madam, you look like you could use a seat and some water." The deep voice startled her from her thoughts. Nora looked up to see a tall man with sun-weathered skin and kind eyes watching her with concern. His broad-brimmed hat shaded a face that wasn't conventionally handsome but had a rugged charm to it. A deputy's badge gleamed on his chest. "I'll be fine, thank you," she managed, hastily wiping away tears. "I'm Deputy Ross Ingram," he said, removing his hat. "And with all due respect, madam, you don't look fine at all." Nora straightened her back, pride still intact despite everything. "Nora Norton, I've had some unexpected news. The man I was meant to marry has changed his mind." Deputy Ingram's expression softened. "Jenkins sent you that letter, didn't he? Henry Jenkins from the Double J Ranch," she nodded, surprised. "Come along, Miss Norton. Mrs. Holbrook runs the boarding house. She'll have a room for you while you figure things out." "I can't afford first nights on the town," he interrupted gently. "Silver Reef takes care of its own, even the newcomers." Nora wanted to protest, but found she lacked the strength. She allowed Deputy Ingram to escort her to a neat 2-story building with a freshly painted sign that read Holbrook Boarding House. Mrs. Holbrook was a plump woman with silver-streaked hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. She took one look at Nora's tear-stained face and ushered her inside without asking questions. "Jenkins is a fool," Deputy Ingram muttered to Mrs. Holbrook. "Sent for her all the way from back east, then changed his mind when she arrived. Typical Henry." Mrs. Holbrook clucked her tongue. "Always thought he needed a brood mare, not a wife." Nora flinched at the words, and the older woman immediately looked contrite. "I'm sorry, dear, that was thoughtless of me. Come along now, let's get you settled." The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, washstand, and a window overlooking the main street. Nora sat on the edge of the bed after Mrs. Holbrook left, allowing the tears to come freely at last. She had no family to return to, no home waiting for her. The money she'd managed to save after settling her parents' debts had gone toward her train ticket west and the few possessions she'd brought with her. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Norton," Deputy Ingram's voice came through the door. "Mrs. Holbrook has supper ready downstairs if you'd care to join us." Nora considered declining, but her stomach reminded her that she hadn't eaten since early morning. "I'll be right down," she called, splashing water on her face from the basin. In the dining room, several boarders were already seated at a long oak table. They glanced up curiously as she entered, but Mrs. Holbrook's sharp look prevented any questions. "Everyone, this is Miss Norton," Deputy Ingram announced. "She'll be staying with us for a while." A gray-haired man with spectacles nodded politely. "Dr. Samuel Wilson, town physician. Welcome to Silver Reef, Miss Norton." Others introduced themselves: a schoolteacher, a clerk from the mercantile, and a young woman who worked at the assay office. Each was friendly, but Nora could sense their curiosity. "What brings you to our little town?" asked the schoolteacher, Miss Peterson. Before Nora could formulate a response, Deputy Ingram cleared his throat. Miss Norton is considering taking up a position here. Nothing's settled yet." She shot him a grateful glance for the small mercy of his intervention. As they ate Mrs. Holbrook's hearty stew and biscuits, conversation flowed around Nora, giving her time to collect herself. Occasionally, she caught Deputy Ingram watching her with thoughtful eyes. After supper, as the others dispersed to their evening activities, he approached her again. "Miss Norton, if I may speak frankly," he began, his voice low, "Henry Jenkins isn't worth your tears. He's known for being particular to the point of foolishness." "It isn't just about Mr. Jenkins," Nora admitted. "It's that I have nowhere to go and limited funds. I came west to start a new life, and now—" "Silver Reef has opportunities for a capable woman," he said. "What were you before you decided to come west?" "I worked as a seamstress in Boston, and before that, I helped my father with his bookkeeping." Ross Ingram's eyes brightened. "As it happens, Mrs. Turner at the dress shop has been looking for someone with sewing skills. And Mr. Pemberton at the bank mentioned needing someone who understands figures." Hope flickered briefly in Nora's chest. "Do you truly think they might hire me? I can introduce you tomorrow," he offered. "Get some rest tonight, Miss Norton. Things often look brighter in the morning." As Nora climbed the stairs to her room, she wondered about the deputy's kindness. Was it merely his duty to assist a stranded traveler, or was there something more to his attentive concern? Morning brought clarity and renewed determination. Nora dressed in her best day dress, navy blue with modest white trim, and pinned her chestnut hair in a neat bun. The woman in the small mirror looked composed, if a bit pale, with no hint of yesterday's despair. Mrs. Holbrook provided a substantial breakfast and pressed a small package into Nora's hands. "Lunch," she explained, "for your day of job hunting." Deputy Ingram was waiting in the parlor, hat in hand. He looked different out of uniform, wearing a clean checked shirt and brown vest. His dark hair was neatly combed, and Nora noticed for the first time that his eyes were a warm hazel color. "You look ready to take on Silver Reef," he commented with an approving nod. "I intend to," Nora replied with more confidence than she felt. "I cannot thank you enough for your assistance, Deputy Ross," he corrected. "When I'm not wearing the badge, I'm just Ross." Their first stop was Turner's dress shop, a tidy establishment with bolts of fabric displayed in the window and several ready-made garments on mannequins. Mrs. Turner was a slender woman with nimble fingers and sharp eyes. She examined Nora's own dress with a professional gaze. "Did you make this yourself?" she asked. "Yes, madam. I designed and sewed all my own clothing." Mrs. Turner nodded approvingly. "Show me your stitching." Nora turned back her cuff to reveal the neat, even stitches along the seam. "Can you embroider?" "I can. I also do beadwork and lace making." Mrs. Turner's eyebrows rose. "Lace making, that's a rare skill in these parts." She glanced at Ross. "Your deputy has brought me a treasure, it seems." After demonstrating her skills on a scrap of fabric, Nora found herself employed 3 days a week at Turner's dress shop. The pay was modest but fair, and Mrs. Turner hinted that there would be extra work during the busy season. "Now let's see about Pemberton at the bank," Ross said as they left the shop. Mr. Pemberton was less immediately impressed than Mrs. Turner had been. The banker peered at Nora over wire-rimmed spectacles, his expression doubtful. "A female bookkeeper, most unusual," he murmured. "My father taught me his methods from the time I was 12, Nora explained. "I kept the ledgers for his carpentry business for 8 years before his passing." Mr. Pemberton slid a ledger across his desk. "Show me how you would balance these accounts." Nora worked methodically, quickly finding and correcting 2 small errors in the columns. When she finished, Mr. Pemberton examined her work with surprise. Well, it seems Deputy Ingram was right about your abilities. I can offer you 2 days a week to start, more if your work proves satisfactory." By midday, Nora had secured employment for 5 days each week, with the prospect of additional work. As they walked back toward the boarding house, she felt a lightness that had been absent since receiving that devastating letter. "I cannot thank you enough," she told Ross sincerely. "You've quite literally saved my future." He shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed by her gratitude. "It's what neighbors do. Besides, Silver Reef needed your skills. You're doing us a favor as much as the other way around. Still, I'm grateful. Would you? Would you allow me to treat you to a meal once I receive my first wages? It's the least I can do." A slow smile spread across his face. "I'd be honored, Miss Norton. Though I should warn you, my appetite is legendary." Nora laughed, the sound surprising her. She hadn't expected to laugh again so soon. Over the following weeks, Nora settled into the rhythm of life in Silver Reef. Her mornings at the bank were quiet and methodical, while her afternoons at the dress shop allowed her to exercise her creativity. She gradually made friends among the townspeople, who accepted her as one of their own with remarkable ease. Mrs. Holbrook reduced her rent when Nora offered to help with the bookkeeping for the boarding house, and Dr. Wilson engaged her to make a new suit for his nephew's wedding. Her financial situation, while not abundant, was at least stable. The one constant throughout her adjustment was Ross Ingram. Though never intrusive, he seemed to materialize whenever she needed assistance carrying her heavy packages from the mercantile, escorting her home after dark, or simply stopping by to share town news. Nora found herself looking forward to these encounters more than she cared to admit. Ross was unlike any man she'd known in Boston. He was straightforward and honest without the polished manners that often concealed empty character. When he gave his word, it was unbreakable. When he offered help, it came without expectation of return. One Saturday evening, nearly a month after her arrival, Ross invited her to attend the town social. "Nothing fancy," he assured her. "Just music, dancing, and more food than even I can eat." Nora hesitated, thinking of her limited wardrobe. "I'm not sure I have anything suitable." "Folks here don't stand on ceremony," he said. "But if it matters to you, I happen to know Mrs. Turner has been working on something she says would suit you perfectly." The dress Mrs. Turner had created was indeed perfect, a soft blue calico with delicate white embroidery at the collar and cuffs. When Nora protested that she couldn't afford such a luxury, the dressmaker waved away her concerns. "Consider it an advance on future work," she insisted. "Besides, every woman deserves a pretty dress for dancing." The social was held in the schoolhouse, with benches pushed back against the walls and lanterns casting a warm glow over the proceedings. A three-piece band played lively tunes while children darted between the adults and teenagers giggled in corners. Ross found her immediately, his eyes widening appreciatively at the sight of her in the blue dress. "Miss Norton, you look lovely." Nora felt her cheeks warm at the simple compliment. "Thank you, and please, after all your kindness, I think you might call me Nora." "Nora," he repeated, as if testing the name. "It suits you." The evening passed in a blur of music, laughter, and conversation. Ross introduced her to dozens of people she hadn't yet met, including his older brother Ryan, who ran the livery stable, and his sister-in-law Martha, who immediately invited Nora to Sunday dinner. When Ross led her onto the dance floor for a lively reel, Nora discovered another surprise. The tall, sometimes awkward deputy moved with surprising grace. His hand at her waist was respectful but steady, guiding her through the steps with confidence. "You're quite the dancer, Deputy Ingram," she teased as they circled each other. "My mother insisted all her sons learn," he replied with a grin. "Said no son of hers would stomp on a lady's toes." As the evening progressed, the band shifted to slower melodies. Ross hesitated before asking, "Would you care for another dance?" The waltz brought them closer, his hand warm against her back. Nora was acutely aware of their proximity, of the clean scent of his soap and the slight roughness of his palm against her fingers. "You're settling in well," he commented. "People speak highly of you." "I've found kindness everywhere here," she replied. "It's so different from Boston, where neighbors might live next door for years without truly knowing one another. That's one advantage of a small town, hard to remain strangers for long." He guided her smoothly around a corner. "Though I imagine Boston has advantages of its own. Theaters, museums, libraries," Nora nodded, "but I find I don't miss them as much as I expected." "No, what do you miss then?" The question was innocent, but it stirred memories Nora had been trying to suppress. My parents, she said softly. Our home, the certainty of knowing where I belonged. Ross's eyes held sympathy without pity. That certainty will come again, he said with quiet confidence. You're building a place for yourself here, day by day. As he escorted her back to the boarding house after the social, Nora realized he was right. In just a month, she had created the beginnings of a life in Silver Reef, work she enjoyed, acquaintances becoming friends, and a sense of purpose each morning. I had a wonderful time, she told him as they reached the boarding house porch. Thank you for persuading me to attend. The pleasure was mine. He hesitated, then added, Sunday is my day off. I thought perhaps, if the weather holds, you might enjoy a picnic by the creek. The aspens are turning golden this time of year. The invitation was clearly more personal than his previous offers of assistance. Nora felt a flutter of something she hadn't experienced in a long time, anticipation, perhaps, or hope. I would like that very much, she said. Ross's smile brightened his entire face. I'll collect you at noon, then. Sunday dawned clear and cool, with the crisp edge of early autumn in the air. Nora dressed with care in her green day dress, adding a shawl for the afternoon chill that was sure to come. She packed extra cookies she'd baked the previous evening, wanting to contribute something to the picnic. Ross arrived promptly at noon, driving a smart buggy instead of his usual horse. In the back was a large basket covered with a checked cloth. My sister-in-law insisted on providing the food, he explained as he helped Nora into the seat. Martha believes no one can pack a proper picnic but herself. The creek was about 2 miles outside of town, a clear stream running through a grove of aspens that were indeed turning brilliant gold. Ross spread a blanket in a sunny spot while Nora unpacked the impressive array of food Martha had provided: fried chicken, potato salad, fresh bread, apple tarts, and a jar of lemonade. As they ate, conversation flowed easily between them. Ross told stories of growing up on his family's small ranch with his 4 brothers, of his decision to become a deputy rather than a rancher, and of his hopes to someday have a place of his own. Not a big spread, he clarified. Just enough land for a good garden, some horses, maybe a few cattle. Somewhere peaceful. It sounds lovely, Nora said sincerely. I've always lived in the city. The open spaces here still take my breath away sometimes. And what of your dreams? Ross asked, stretching out on the blanket. Before everything changed, what did you hope for? Nora looked away, watching the golden leaves trembling in the breeze. The usual things, I suppose, a home of my own, a family. Her voice caught on the last word. Though some dreams aren't meant to be. Some dreams change, Ross corrected gently. That doesn't make them any less worthy. She turned back to find him watching her intently, his expression thoughtful. Henry Jenkins is a fool, he said suddenly. Nora blinked at the unexpected comment. I beg your pardon, Jenkins, rejecting you because you can't bear children, as if that's all a wife is good for. His jaw tightened. A man looking for a brood mare should visit a livestock auction, not send for a bride. Heat rose in Nora's cheeks. You know about that? Ross looked chagrined. Small town. The station master mentioned Jenkins had sent for a bride from back east when you arrived with that letter. He shrugged. It wasn't hard to piece together. And now the whole town knows my shame, Nora said quietly. Shame? Ross sat up straight. Nora, no one thinks less of you. If anything, folks are appalled at Jenkins's behavior. He hesitated, then reached for her hand. Some things aren't meant to be chosen, they're given to us to bear as best we can. It's what we do choose that defines us. His calloused fingers were warm around hers, the touch comforting rather than presumptuous. Nora found she didn't want to pull away. Thank you, she whispered. For understanding. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the play of light through the aspen leaves. When the shadows lengthened and the air grew cooler, Ross reluctantly suggested they head back to town. Sunday dinner at my brother's is mandatory, he explained as they packed up the remains of their picnic. You'd be welcome to join us. Perhaps another time, Nora declined. I promised Mrs. Holbrook I'd help prepare for her sister's visit tomorrow. As the buggy rolled back toward Silver Reef, Nora felt a contentment she hadn't experienced in a long time. Ross Ingram's friendship had become precious to her over the past month, and today's outing hinted at the possibility of something more. Yet she couldn't quite silence the voice of doubt that whispered in her mind. Even if Ross didn't care about her inability to bear children now, wouldn't he come to regret it eventually? Every man wanted sons to carry on his name, to inherit his property. These thoughts accompanied her back to the boarding house, where she busied herself helping Mrs. Holbrook turn out the guest room for her sister's arrival. The next few weeks brought a flurry of activity to Silver Reef. A new vein of silver was discovered in one of the mines, bringing an influx of miners and the businesses that catered to them. The town swelled, and with it, the demand for Nora's services both at the bank and the dress shop. She and Ross continued to see each other regularly Sunday picnics when weather permitted, meals at the town's small restaurant, and quiet walks after church. He never pressed for more than she was willing to give, content with the gradual deepening of their relationship. October brought the first dusting of snow to the hills around Silver Reef, and with it came news that changed the tenor of the town. A band of outlaws had been terrorizing settlements to the north, robbing banks and stage coaches with increasing boldness. "The marshal thinks they're heading this way," Ross told Nora as they walked one evening. "The silver shipments from the mine are too tempting a target." Worry creased her brow. "Will you be involved if they come here?" "It's my job," he said simply. "But Sheriff Taylor has wired for additional deputies from the territorial office. We'll be prepared." Despite his reassurance, Nora found herself watching the street anxiously whenever Ross was on patrol. The thought of him facing dangerous outlaws made her realize just how important he had become to her. One afternoon in late October, as Nora was finishing her work at the bank, a commotion in the street drew her attention. Peering out the window, she saw a group of rough-looking men dismounting in front of the saloon across the way. Mr. Pemberton appeared at her elbow, his face grave. "Those would be the Dawson gang," he murmured. "Lock the front door, Miss Norton, and then go to the back office. I'll handle any business they might bring our way." Nora's hands trembled as she turned the key in the lock. Through the window, she could see more men gathering in the street, townspeople watching the newcomers with wary eyes. She spotted Ross approaching slowly from the direction of the sheriff's office, his hand resting near his holstered pistol. The leader of the gang, a tall man with a scarred face and cold eyes, noticed Ross's approach and turned to face him. Even through the glass, Nora could sense the tension crackling between them. "Deputy," the outlaw acknowledged with a mocking tip of his hat. "Dawson," Ross replied evenly. "What brings you to Silver Reef?" "Just passing through. Thought we'd enjoy some of your town's hospitality before moving on." "You're welcome to a meal and supplies," Ross said, his voice carrying clearly to where Nora stood listening. "But I'll need to ask you to leave your weapons with the sheriff while you're here." A ripple of laughter went through the gang. Dawson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Now that doesn't seem very hospitable." "It's the law in Silver Reef," Ross said firmly. "Sheriff Taylor is expecting you at his office." For a moment, Nora was certain violence would erupt right there in the street. Dawson's hand hovered near his gun, and his men shifted restlessly behind him. Then, surprisingly, the outlaw leader shrugged. "Always did believe in respecting local customs. Boys, let's pay the sheriff a visit." As the gang moved toward the sheriff's office, Ross caught sight of Nora watching through the window. He gave her a reassuring nod before following the outlaws. Mr. Pemberton released a tense breath. "That could have gone much worse. Dawson has a reputation for having a hair-trigger temper." "Do you think they'll really surrender their weapons?" Nora asked doubtfully. "Not likely," the banker admitted. "But it gives the sheriff time to telegraph for reinforcements, and it tells Dawson we're not the easy target he might have hoped for." The Dawson gang remained in Silver Reef for 3 uneasy days. They kept to the saloon and the hotel, watched constantly by Ross and the other deputies. The townspeople went about their business with careful vigilance, women and children staying close to home. On the morning of the 4th day, Nora arrived at the bank to find Mr. Pemberton unusually agitated. "The mine payroll is arriving on today's stage," he explained in a hushed voice. Normally, Sheriff Taylor would provide an escort, but with Dawson in town. Surely they'll delay the shipment, Nora suggested. The mine owner refuses, says the men need to be paid on time or he risks a strike. The banker shook his head in frustration. The stage is due at 2 o'clock. Deputy Ingram and Sheriff Taylor will meet it, but I don't like it. Dawson is sure to have caught wind of the schedule. Throughout the morning, Nora found it difficult to concentrate on her work. The usual quiet of the bank seemed oppressive, charged with anticipation. When the town's clock struck 1, Mr. Pemberton suggested she take her lunch break. Best to be back before the stage arrives, he advised. I'd rather not have you walking about town if there's trouble. Nora was crossing the street toward the boarding house when she noticed unusual activity near the livery stable. The Dawson gang was saddling their horses, checking weapons that had mysteriously reappeared despite the sheriff's orders. Her step faltered. They were preparing to intercept the stage, she was certain of it. Making a split-second decision, Nora altered her course and hurried toward the sheriff's office. She needed to warn Ross. The office was empty except for a young deputy she didn't recognize. Sheriff Taylor and Deputy Ingram rode out to escort the stage in, he explained when she asked. They left about 20 minutes ago. The Dawson gang is preparing to leave town, Nora told him urgently. They're armed. I believe they mean to rob the stage. The deputy's face paled. I need to warn them. He hesitated, clearly torn between his duty to remain at his post and the need to alert his colleagues. I can stay here, Nora offered. If anyone comes looking for the sheriff, I'll say he was called away on urgent business. The young man nodded gratefully. I'll ride the back trail, might be able to catch them before Dawson does. After the deputy left, Nora paced the small office, anxiety building with each passing minute. Through the window, she saw the Dawson gang ride out of town, heading east toward the stage road. Half an hour later, the distant sound of gunfire froze her in place. It continued sporadically for what seemed an eternity, but was probably only minutes. When silence fell again, Nora could bear it no longer. She hurried to the livery stable where she found Ross's brother Ryan preparing to ride out. I heard the shooting, she explained breathlessly. I need to know if Ross is safe. Ryan's face was grim as he tightened his horse's girth. I'm heading out there now. Stay here, Miss Norton. I'm coming with you, she insisted, her voice leaving no room for argument. Ryan glanced at her dress and boots, clearly impractical for riding. Take my wife's mare, he said after a moment. She's gentle, but stay behind me, you understand. They rode hard along the stage road, following the tracks of multiple horses. As they crested a rise, they saw the aftermath of the confrontation. The stagecoach halted in the road, horses stamping nervously, and several bodies on the ground. Nora's heart seemed to stop beating until she spotted Ross kneeling beside a wounded man. He looked up as they approached, surprise and then relief crossing his face when he recognized her. Nora, what are you doing here? I had to know you were safe, she said simply, dismounting with Ryan's help. The scene was chaotic, but less bloody than she had feared. Sheriff Taylor was binding a flesh wound on the stage driver's arm. The young deputy who had ridden out to warn them was helping a passenger back into the coach. Two of the Dawson gang lay dead in the road while the others had apparently fled. Are you hurt? Nora asked, scanning Ross for injuries. Just a graze, he admitted, showing a tear in his sleeve stained with blood. The deputy's warning gave us time to prepare an ambush of our own. When Dawson and his men tried to take the stage, we were ready for them. Ryan moved to help the sheriff while Nora insisted on examining Ross's arm. The bullet had indeed just grazed him, leaving a shallow furrow that bled freely but wasn't serious. Let me bandage this properly, she said, tearing a strip from her petticoat with practical efficiency. As she worked, Ross watched her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. You shouldn't have come out here, he said quietly. It could have been dangerous. I couldn't stay in town not knowing if you were alive or dead, Nora replied, focusing on the neat bandage she was tying. Not when you've become so important to me. His free hand came up to cover hers, stilling her movement. Nora, look at me. She raised her eyes to meet his gaze, so intense it nearly took her breath away. Today made something very clear to me, he said. Life's too short and too uncertain for hesitation. I've been careful with you, taking things slow because I didn't want to rush you after what happened with Jenkins. But I need you to know how I feel." Nora's heart hammered against her ribs as Ross continued. "I love you, Nora Norton. I have almost from the first day when you stood in the street with that letter in your hand, looking lost but still holding your head high." His fingers tightened around hers. "I don't expect an answer now, just think about it." Before she could respond, Sheriff Taylor called for Ross's help with the wounded outlaw. The moment passed, but Nora felt forever changed by those few simple words. The return to Silver Reef was a solemn procession. The stage continued on to town with its passengers and payroll intact, while the sheriff's party followed more slowly, bringing the bodies of the fallen outlaws and the wounded prisoner. Word of the attempted robbery and the deputy's successful defense spread quickly through town. By nightfall, when Ross was finally free of his duties, a crowd had gathered at the saloon to celebrate the defeat of the Dawson gang. He found Nora waiting on the boarding house porch, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the evening chill. "You should be celebrating with the others," she said as he climbed the steps to join her. "I'd rather be here." He settled beside her on the wooden bench. "Sheriff Taylor is enjoying his moment of glory, and I've had enough excitement for one day." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching as lamps were lit in windows across town. "I've been thinking about what you said," Nora finally began, "out there on the road." Ross turned to face her, his expression carefully neutral, and, I think, she took a deep breath. "I think I've been afraid to admit how much you've come to mean to me. After Jenkins rejected me, I told myself I shouldn't hope for that kind of happiness." "Jenkins is a fool," Ross repeated his earlier assessment, "and I'm not him." "No, you're not," Nora smiled softly. "You're the man who saw me at my lowest moment and offered help without conditions. You're the man who makes me laugh, who listens when I speak, who values me for exactly who I am." She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I love you too, Ross. I think I have for quite some time." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Without a word, he leaned forward and kissed her gently at first, then with growing confidence as she responded. When they finally drew apart, Nora rested her forehead against his shoulder. "There's still the matter of children," she said quietly. "I need to be certain you understand what loving me means." Ross tilted her chin up so she could see the sincerity in his eyes. "Nora, I need a wife, not a womb. I want a partner to share my life, to build a home with, to grow old beside. If God blesses us with children through adoption or some miracle, I'll be grateful. But you are enough. You have always been enough." Tears welled in Nora's eyes at his words, healing something broken deep inside her. "How did I find you?" she whispered. "Perhaps we found each other," he suggested, pulling her close again. "Right when we both needed it most." The following Sunday, Ross invited Nora to dinner at his brother's ranch outside of town. She knew this was significant, a formal introduction to his family as more than just a friend. Ryan and Martha Ingram's home was a comfortable two-story house surrounded by corrals and outbuildings. Their 3 children, ranging from 7 to 13, watched with open curiosity as Ross helped Nora down from the buggy. "So you're Miss Norton," the oldest boy said bluntly. "Uncle Ross talks about you all the time." "Thomas," Martha scolded, emerging from the house. "Mind your manners." She was a sturdy woman with a kind face and practical manner. "Welcome to our home, Miss Norton. We've been looking forward to meeting you properly." Dinner was a lively affair, with Ryan telling stories of his and Ross's boyhood escapades, while the children peppered Nora with questions about Boston. Martha served a magnificent meal that culminated in an apple pie Nora could only envy. "Ross tells us you're quite accomplished," Martha said as they cleared the dishes. "Sewing, bookkeeping, a woman of many talents." "I've been fortunate to find work I enjoy," Nora replied. "Silver Reef has been more welcoming than I dared hope." Martha's eyes twinkled knowingly. "And my brother-in-law has been particularly welcoming, I understand." Nora felt herself blushing. "Ross has been very kind," Martha laughed. "Girl, that man is head over heels in love with you. I haven't seen him like this. Well, ever." Before Nora could respond, Ross appeared in the doorway. "Are you ladies talking about me?" he asked suspiciously. "Of course we are," Martha replied cheerfully. "Someone has to warn Nora what she's getting into." After dinner, Ross suggested a walk to show Nora the property. As they strolled past the barn and corrals, he pointed out the boundaries of his brother's land and the distant hills where their father's ranch had been. "Our parents are gone now," he explained. "Pa died 5 years ago, Ma last spring. The home place went to my oldest brother, James. Ryan got this parcel as his share." "And you?" Nora asked. "What was your inheritance?" "Cash mostly, not a fortune, but enough to start something of my own when the time is right." He led her to a rise overlooking a small valley. "I've had my eye on that piece down there. 160 acres with good water and shelter from the winter winds." Nora could picture it, a snug house in the valley, horses in the corral, perhaps a garden behind a white picket fence. It was a vision of domesticity she'd nearly abandoned hope of ever having. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Ross turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Nora, I'm not a man for long courtships. I know my mind and my heart." He dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. "I love you. I want to build a life with you on that land or anywhere else you'd care to go. Will you marry me?" Though she had begun to hope for this moment, the reality of it still took her breath away. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Ross Ingram, I will marry you." He rose and swept her into his arms, kissing her with a joyful exuberance that made her laugh against his lips. "When?" he asked eagerly. "How soon can we make it official?" "Don't you think we should wait a bit?" Nora suggested. "We've only known each other for 2 months. 2 months, 3 days, and approximately 6 hours, Ross corrected with a grin. "And I knew you were special within the first 5 minutes. Nora couldn't help but laugh at his enthusiasm. "Christmas," she suggested. "That gives us nearly 2 months to prepare, and it's a hopeful time for new beginnings." "Christmas it is," Ross agreed, sealing the promise with another kiss. The news of their engagement spread through Silver Reef with predictable speed. By the following afternoon, Nora had received congratulations from nearly everyone she encountered, along with more than a few knowing smiles that suggested the town had seen this coming long before she had. Mrs. Holbrook insisted on hosting the wedding at the boarding house. "It's practically your home," she declared, "and I make a fruitcake that will have people talking for years." Mrs. Turner offered to create a wedding dress as her gift. "Nothing too fancy," she assured Nora, who was concerned about the expense, "but every bride deserves something special." Preparations for the December wedding occupied much of Nora's free time in the weeks that followed. She and Ross discussed their future home, agreeing that he would begin building on his valley property in the spring. Until then, they would rent the small house behind Dr. Wilson's office, which was becoming vacant in January. November brought heavy snows to the mountains around Silver Reef, though the town itself remained relatively accessible. Ross was kept busy with his deputy duties, especially when Sheriff Taylor traveled to the territorial capital for a lawmen's conference. One evening in late November, as Nora was finishing her work at the bank, Mr. Pemberton approached her desk with an unusual request. "Miss Norton, I've received a letter from the First Bank of Denver. They're seeking recommendations for a head bookkeeper at their new branch in Durango." The banker adjusted his spectacles. "I've taken the liberty of putting forward your name." Nora stared at him in surprise. "But I'm engaged to be married in less than a month. I couldn't possibly consider a position in Durango." Of course," Mr. Pemberton nodded. "I mentioned your upcoming nuptials in my letter. However, the position offers a salary 3 times what we can pay you here, along with a substantial housing allowance." He handed her a letter. "They've invited you to interview. The train fare would be provided." Nora accepted the letter automatically, her mind whirling. Such a position would have been beyond her wildest dreams just a few months ago. The salary Mr. Pemberton mentioned would provide security and comfort beyond anything she and Ross could hope for on a deputy's pay and modest ranch income. "I'm flattered," she said slowly. "But my future is here with Ross." "Naturally," the banker agreed, but perhaps Deputy Ingram might consider opportunities in Durango as well. Every growing town needs good lawmen. The suggestion lingered in Nora's thoughts as she walked home through the early winter twilight. Would Ross consider leaving Silver Reef? His family was here, his connections, the land he hoped to build on. Yet Durango would offer advantages, better pay, perhaps greater opportunities for advancement. She was still pondering this when she reached the boarding house to find Ross waiting on the porch, stamping his feet against the cold. "There you are," he greeted her with a kiss. "I was beginning to worry." Once inside, settled in the parlor with cups of Mrs. Holbrook's strong coffee, Nora showed him the letter. "Mr. Pemberton recommended me without asking," she explained. "I was quite taken aback." Ross read the letter carefully, his expression thoughtful. "This is quite an opportunity," he said finally. "3 times your current salary." "Yes, but it's in Durango. I told Mr. Pemberton I couldn't consider it, of course." "Why, of course?" Ross asked, surprising her. "Durango isn't so very far. We could visit Ryan and Martha several times a year." Nora stared at him. "You'd consider moving to Durango?" "I'd consider anything that's important to you," he said simply. "I became a deputy because I believe in justice and protecting those who need it. I can do that in Durango as easily as in Silver Reef." He smiled at her confusion. "Nora, I want to marry you, not your location. Home is where we are together." His willingness to consider her professional opportunity as seriously as his own touched Nora deeply. This, perhaps more than anything else, confirmed that she had found a true partner in Ross Ingram. "I don't want to leave Silver Reef," she said after a moment's reflection. "Not now when we're just beginning to build our life here, but thank you for being willing to consider it. That means more than I can say." Ross squeezed her hand. "There will be other opportunities here or elsewhere. We'll face them together when they come." As their wedding day approached, Nora found herself thinking often of the twists of fate that had brought her to this moment. If Henry Jenkins hadn't rejected her, she would now be his wife, living on the Double J Ranch, forever trying to compensate for what she couldn't give him. Instead, she was preparing to marry a man who loved her completely, barrenness and all. The pain of Jenkins's rejection had faded to a distant memory, replaced by gratitude for the path that had led her to Ross. Christmas Eve dawned clear and cold, with fresh snow blanketing Silver Reef in pristine white. Mrs. Turner delivered the wedding dress that morning, a creation of ivory silk with delicate lace trim that made Nora gasp when she saw it. "It's too much," she protested. "This fabric must have cost a fortune. Consider it an investment in Silver Reef's future," Mrs. Turner said with a smile. "Everyone knows you and Deputy Ingram are meant for each other. Some happiness in these parts is good for business." Martha Ingram arrived to help Nora dress, bringing with her a small blue ribbon. "Something borrowed and blue," she explained, tucking it into Nora's chestnut hair, which was arranged in an elegant knot. "It was my mother's. Ross would want you to have a piece of her today." The boarding house parlor had been transformed with evergreen boughs, red ribbons, and dozens of candles. Mrs. Holbrook had outdone herself with the decorations, creating an atmosphere both festive and solemn, as Nora descended the stairs on Dr. Wilson's arm, the doctor having offered to give her away in the absence of her father. She saw the room was filled with townspeople, friends, and neighbors who had welcomed her into their community, and at the front, waiting beside the minister, stood Ross. He wore a new black suit with a silver brocade vest, his dark hair neatly combed, his face freshly shaved. But it was his expression that caught at Nora's heart, a look of such joy and wonder that she felt tears threatening. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They exchanged the traditional vows, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever life might bring. When Ross slipped the gold band onto her finger, a band he'd saved for months to purchase, Nora felt the final piece of her new life falling into place. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Ross's kiss was tender and reverent, mindful of their audience yet conveying the depth of his feelings. When they turned to face their friends as Mr. and Mrs. Ross Ingram, the cheer that went up seemed to shake the very rafters. The celebration that followed was joyous and lively. Mrs. Holbrook's dining room groaned under the weight of food contributed by half the town roast turkey, ham, countless side dishes, and desserts of every description, including the promised fruitcake. Sheriff Taylor offered a toast to the couple, followed by Ryan Ingram's more humorous tribute to his younger brother. Even Mr. Pemberton unbent enough to wish them prosperity and happiness in their future together. As the party continued into the evening, Ross drew Nora aside. "I have something for you," he said, leading her to a quiet corner. From his pocket he withdrew a small package wrapped in silver paper. Inside was a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. When Nora opened it, she found a tiny photograph of Ross on one side. The other side was empty. "For our future," he explained. "Whatever form it takes." Nora understood his meaning immediately. The empty space could hold a photograph of a child someday adopted, perhaps, or some miracle neither of them dared count on. Or it could remain a symbol of possibilities yet to be discovered. "It's perfect," she whispered, allowing him to fasten it around her neck. "I'll treasure it always." Later that night, after their guests had departed and they retired to the small house doctor, Wilson had vacated early as his wedding gift to them. Ross and Nora began their life as husband and wife with the sweet discovery of each other. In his arms, Nora found a passion and tenderness that banished all memories of rejection. Ross's love was a healing balm, making her feel whole and cherished in ways she had never imagined possible. "I love you, Mrs. Ingram," he murmured as they lay together in the darkness. "And I love you, Mr. Ingram," she replied, her heart full to bursting with happiness. Spring came early to Silver Reef that year. By March, the snows had retreated to the highest peaks, and the valley where Ross had purchased land was alive with new growth. Construction on their house began in April, with Ryan and his sons helping Ross lay the foundation and raise the frame. Nora continued her work at the bank and dress shop, saving every penny toward furnishings for their new home. In the evenings, she sewed curtains and quilts, determined that their house would be a true home from the first day. As summer approached, the house took shape, a sturdy two-story structure with a wide front porch and plenty of windows to catch the mountain breezes. Ross insisted on building 4 bedrooms for visitors, and whatever the future might bring, he said with a wink that made Nora smile. They moved in on a perfect June day, their few possessions loaded onto Ryan's wagon. Friends and neighbors arrived throughout the afternoon, bringing housewarming gifts and helping to arrange furniture until everything was just as Nora had envisioned it. That night, alone at last in their new home, Ross and Nora stood on the porch watching the stars appear one by one in the vast Utah sky. "Happy?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "More than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. As summer turned to fall and then to winter again, the Ingrams settled into the rhythm of their life together. Ross continued his work as a deputy, eventually being promoted to senior deputy when Sheriff Taylor announced his intention to retire the following year. Nora's skills at the bank earned her a raise, and Mrs. Turner made her a full partner in the dress shop when arthritis began to limit the older woman's ability to sew. They became known in Silver Reef as a couple who could be counted on in times of need. When the spring floods washed out the Wilsons' home, it was the Ingrams who opened their doors to the displaced family. When the fever swept through town that autumn, Nora worked tirelessly alongside Dr. Wilson to tend the sick. Their marriage was not without challenges. They argued occasionally about money, about the time Ross's duties kept him away, about the garden fence he kept promising to finish. But they never went to bed angry, having agreed early on that reconciliation was more important than pride. On their second anniversary, Ross surprised Nora with a trip to Salt Lake City, where they stayed in a fine hotel and attended the theater, a luxury she hadn't enjoyed since leaving Boston. It was during this trip that they first seriously discussed adoption. "The orphanage here has children of all ages needing homes," Ross mentioned as they walked through the city park. "Sister Mary Joseph says they particularly struggle to place the older ones. Nora squeezed his hand, touched by his thoughtfulness. Are you certain that's what you want? An older child might come with challenges. So do most worthwhile things in life, he replied with a shrug. Besides, we have love to spare and a home with empty rooms. Seems a shame not to share it. They didn't make a decision that day, agreeing instead to pray on the matter and discuss it further when they returned home. But the seed had been planted, and Nora found herself thinking often of the children waiting for families of their own. Upon their return to Silver Reef, life took an unexpected turn. Sheriff Taylor suffered a heart attack and, though he survived, was advised by Dr. Wilson to retire immediately. The town council met in emergency session and, to everyone's surprise, offered the position of sheriff to Ross. It's sooner than I expected, he admitted to Nora that night, and it would mean more responsibility, more risk. It would also mean you could do more good, she pointed out, and the salary increase would allow us to move forward with adoption sooner if we decide that's right for us. Ross studied her face in the lamplight. You wouldn't worry more. I'll always worry when you strap on that gun, Nora said honestly. But I married you knowing who you are and what you believe in. I wouldn't change that, not even to ease my own mind. 2 days later, Ross Ingram was sworn in as the new sheriff of Silver Reef. The ceremony in the town square was attended by nearly everyone, with Ryan beaming proudly as his younger brother took the oath of office. That autumn brought another change to their lives. A telegram arrived from Denver, addressed to Nora. The president of the First Bank of Denver, the same bank that had offered her the position in Durango 2 years earlier, was planning to open a branch in Silver Reef to serve the growing mining community. He offered Nora the position of head bookkeeper at a salary that made her and Ross both catch their breath. You deserve this, Ross said when she hesitated. You're the most capable person in town when it comes to figures. But people might talk, Nora worried. A woman in such a position, married to the sheriff no less. Ross laughed. Let them talk. Silver Reef has never been a town overly concerned with convention. His expression grew serious. You've supported my career without question. How could I do any less for you? With Ross's encouragement, Nora accepted the position. When the new bank opened in November, she found herself with a private office, 2 assistants, and responsibilities that challenged her intellect in ways her previous work hadn't. The winter of 1883 was particularly harsh in Utah Territory. Heavy snows isolated Silver Reef for weeks at a time, and Ross was kept busy dealing with the challenges. Such weather brought everything from disputes over firewood to rescuing travelers stranded on the mountain roads. It was during one such rescue mission that fate brought a new dimension to the Ingram's life. Ross and his deputies rode out in a blizzard to reach a stagecoach reported missing on the road from Cedar City. They found it overturned in a ravine, the driver dead from the cold and most of the passengers badly injured. Among the survivors was a young woman who had been traveling with her 4-year-old daughter. The mother, gravely injured, asked Ross to deliver a letter to her sister in San Francisco along with the child. Her name is Rebecca, the dying woman whispered. Promise me she'll be safe. Ross made the promise, but the woman died before arrangements could be made to transport the child to her aunt. When he returned home with the small, silent girl bundled in his coat, Nora immediately took her in hand. Poor lamb, she murmured, bathing the child's dirty face and coaxing her to eat some soup. She's in shock, I think. Rebecca remained silent for 3 days, watching Nora and Ross with solemn brown eyes but refusing to speak. They sent telegrams to San Francisco, trying to locate the aunt mentioned in the mother's letter, but received no response. On the 4th day, as Nora was brushing the girl's long, dark hair, Rebecca finally spoke. Are you an angel? Startled, Nora nearly dropped the brush. No, dear. I'm just Nora. Mama said angels would take care of me if she went to heaven. The child's voice was small but clear. She's in heaven now, isn't she? Yes, sweetheart, Nora confirmed gently. Your mama is in heaven. Rebecca considered this for a moment. Then you must be the angel she meant. That evening, when Ross returned home from his duties, he found Nora and Rebecca sitting on the parlor floor, looking at a picture book together. The sight stopped him in his tracks. His capable, beautiful wife with a child who might have been their own, had circumstances been different. "We've had a breakthrough," Nora told him after Rebecca was asleep. "She's talking now and she understands about her mother, but there's still no word from the aunt in San Francisco." Ross sighed, rubbing his tired eyes. "I've asked the San Francisco police to make inquiries. It may be that the aunt has moved, or," he hesitated, "or doesn't want the responsibility of a child." Nora finished the thought. "What happens to Rebecca if we can't find her family? Normally, she would go to the orphanage in Salt Lake City." Ross watched Nora's face carefully. "Unless someone here was willing to take her in." The question hung in the air between them, unspoken but understood. "She's already been through so much," Nora said softly. "To lose her mother, then be sent away to strangers." "We're strangers too," Ross pointed out gently. "Not anymore." Nora's voice held a certainty that surprised even her. "Ross, I know we've only had her for a few days, but I already love her when I think of her going to an orphanage." "You want to keep her," he said, not a question but a statement. "Only if you do too," Nora hastened to add. "This would be a decision we make together." Ross was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "I've been thinking about it since I first brought her home," he admitted finally. "Watching how naturally you care for her, how quickly she's responded to you, it feels right, Nora. As if this was meant to be." 2 weeks later, with still no word from Rebecca's aunt despite extensive inquiries, the Ingrams appeared before the territorial judge who had come to Silver Reef for the winter court session. "You understand this is an unusual situation," Judge Harmon said, peering at them over his spectacles. "Normally, there would be a waiting period, investigations into your suitability as parents." "Yes, Your Honor," Ross replied. "But given the circumstances, the child's age, the lack of known relatives willing to take her, and our established position in the community, we hoped you might consider an expedited process." The judge harumphed thoughtfully. "Sheriff Ingram, Mrs. Ingram, I've received letters from virtually every prominent citizen in Silver Reef vouching for your character and fitness as potential parents. Dr. Wilson informs me the child has already formed a strong attachment to you both." He shuffled through the papers before him, then looked up with a hint of a smile. "I see no reason to delay what seems clearly in the best interest of the child. The adoption is granted, pending final paperwork from the territorial office." And so, just before Christmas of 1883, Rebecca Norton Ingram officially became their daughter. The celebration at the Ingram home that Christmas was especially joyous, with Rebecca's laughter filling the house as she discovered the dolls and books Santa had brought her. "This is the best Christmas ever," she declared as she sat between Ross and Nora before the fire, her new doll clutched tightly in her arms. Ross met Nora's eyes over the child's head. "I couldn't agree more," he said softly. Spring brought new beginnings for Silver Reef, as well as for the Ingram family. The new silver strike proved even richer than expected, bringing prosperity to the town and keeping the new bank and Nora busier than ever. Rebecca thrived in her new home, quickly overcoming the trauma of her mother's death with the resilience of childhood. She attended the town school, made friends with the neighbor children, and developed a particular attachment to Ryan and Martha's youngest son, who treated her like the sister he'd always wanted. As Easter approached, Nora began to feel unwell, tired in the mornings, queasy at the smell of coffee that she normally loved. At first, she attributed it to the strain of balancing her demanding job with motherhood, but when the symptoms persisted, she reluctantly visited Dr. Wilson. The doctor's examination was thorough, his questions precise. When he finally sat back with a thoughtful expression, Nora braced herself for bad news. "Well, Mrs. Ingram," he said slowly, "it appears that Silver Reef will be welcoming a new resident around October." Nora stared at him in disbelief. "That's not possible, I can't. The doctors in Boston were very clear." Dr. Wilson shrugged. "Doctors aren't infallible, my dear, and there are cases in medical literature of women conceiving after years of supposed barrenness. The human body is a mysterious thing." She left his office in a daze, her mind struggling to process the impossible news. A baby. After all this time, after accepting that motherhood would come only through adoption, she was carrying Ross's child. When Ross returned home that evening, he found Nora sitting on the porch swing, watching Rebecca play with the neighbor children in the yard. "You're home early," he commented, bending to kiss her. "Everything all right at the bank?" "I didn't go back after lunch," she said, her voice oddly calm. "I had an appointment with Dr. Wilson." Alarm flashed across Ross's face. "Are you ill? Why didn't you send for me?" "Not ill," Nora shook her head, a smile finally breaking through her shock. "Ross, I'm going to have a baby." He stared at her, his expression cycling through disbelief, confusion, and then dawning joy. "A baby, but the doctors in Boston said they were wrong." Nora took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "Dr. Wilson is certain we're having a baby in October." Ross dropped to his knees before her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pressing his face against her middle. When he looked up, his eyes were wet with tears of happiness. "I never dared hope for this," he whispered. "Never wanted to make you feel that what we had wasn't enough." "Because it was, Nora. You and Rebecca, you've already given me more joy than I ever thought possible." "And now there will be one more to love," she said softly, running her fingers through his hair. That evening, they told Rebecca she would be a big sister. The child's reaction was everything they could have hoped for: excited questions about the baby, solemn promises to be the best big sister ever, and a touching concern for Nora's health that showed how deeply she had bonded with her adoptive mother. The news spread quickly through Silver Reef, met with genuine happiness from their many friends. Mrs. Holbrook insisted on organizing a sewing circle to prepare a layette for the baby. Ryan and Martha offered their children's outgrown cradle and high chair. Even Mr. Pemberton unbent enough to suggest that Nora might want to reduce her hours at the bank as her confinement approached. As Nora's pregnancy progressed, she found herself reflecting often on the journey that had brought her to this point. The letter from Henry Jenkins that had once seemed the end of her hopes now appeared as the first step on the path to true happiness. Had she married Jenkins, she would have lived a life of conditional acceptance at best, always aware of her failure to provide the one thing he truly wanted from her. Instead, she had found Ross, who loved her completely for herself, who had given her a home, a family, and now, impossibly, a child of their own blood to join the daughter of their heart. On a crisp October morning in 1884, after 14 hours of labor with Dr. Wilson attending and Ross pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door, Nora gave birth to a healthy son. They named him James Ryan Ingram, honoring both Ross's father and his brother. When Ross was finally allowed into the bedroom, he approached the bed with reverence, gazing in wonder at his wife cradling their newborn son. "He's perfect," he whispered, carefully taking the tiny bundle when Nora offered him. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and your nose, I think." "Your eyes, though," Nora observed, watching as the baby blinked sleepily up at his father. "That same hazel color." Ross perched carefully on the edge of the bed, balancing the baby in one arm while reaching for Nora's hand with the other. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice thick with emotion. "For what? For not giving up, for coming to Silver Reef, for loving me, for our children." He squeezed her fingers gently. "For everything." When Rebecca was allowed in to meet her new brother, her awe and immediate love for the baby completed the circle of their family. Watching her daughter carefully stroke the baby's cheek with one finger, Nora felt a contentment so profound it brought tears to her eyes. This was what she had once thought forever beyond her reach: a husband who cherished her, children to love, a home filled with happiness. All because a man named Henry Jenkins had rejected her, setting her on the path to finding a man who wanted a wife, not merely a womb. "I love you," she told Ross later, as they watched their children, both miracles in their own way, sleeping peacefully. "I never imagined I could be this happy." "I always knew," he replied, drawing her close. "From that very first day when you stood in the street looking lost but determined, I knew then that you were the one I'd been waiting for all my life." In the years that followed, Silver Reef continued to prosper, though like all mining towns, it eventually faced the decline of its primary resource. When the silver began to play out in the late 1880s, many businesses closed and families moved on to more promising locations. But the Ingrams remained, their roots too deep in the community they had helped to build. Ross served as sheriff until 1893, when he turned his badge over to a younger man and focused on expanding the ranch that had grown from his original homestead. Nora continued her work at the bank until it closed in 1889, then opened a small accounting office serving the remaining businesses and the surrounding farms and ranches. Her reputation for honesty and precision brought clients from as far away as Cedar City and St. George. Rebecca grew into a lovely young woman with her mother's compassion and her father's sense of justice. After attending the territorial normal school, she returned to Silver Reef to teach in the same schoolhouse where she had once been a student. James, always called Jamie, inherited his father's height and his mother's quick mind. From an early age, he showed a talent for working with animals, especially horses, becoming at 16 the youngest horse trainer in the county. And in 1888, to their continued amazement and joy, Nora and Ross welcomed another miracle, a daughter they named Elizabeth Martha, after both their mothers. Betsy, as she was immediately called, completed their family with her sunny disposition and determined spirit. On Christmas Eve of 1899, as the century drew to a close, the Ingram home was filled with family and friends celebrating not only the holiday, but also Nora and Ross's 20th wedding anniversary. Rebecca was there with her fiancé, a young doctor who had come to take over Dr. Wilson's practice. Jamie brought his sweetheart, the daughter of Ryan's oldest friend. 11-year-old Betsy flitted between the adults, collecting hugs and compliments on the Christmas decorations she had helped arrange. When the house finally quieted after the last guest departed, Nora and Ross stood on their porch as they had so many evenings before, looking out at the stars above their valley. 20 years, Ross marveled, his arm around her waist. Sometimes it seems like yesterday that you arrived in Silver Reef with that letter in your hand. And sometimes it feels as though I've always been here with you, Nora replied, leaning into his embrace. Though strands of silver now threaded through her chestnut hair and lines marked the passage of time on both their faces, the love between them had only deepened with the years. Any regrets? Ross asked, a question he posed every anniversary. And as she always did, Nora turned in his arms to meet his gaze directly. Not one, she answered truthfully. Every step of the journey brought me exactly where I was meant to be here, with you, with our family. How could I regret any of it? Ross brushed a kiss against her forehead. Henry Jenkins was the biggest fool in Utah Territory, he said, echoing the sentiment he'd expressed so many times over the years. But I'll be grateful to him until my dying day for not recognizing the treasure he rejected. As will I, Nora agreed, smiling up at the man who had given her not just a home but a life filled with purpose and love. Because you were right all along, you needed a wife, not a womb, and I needed a man who could see me for who I truly am. I see you, Ross whispered, the words both a statement of fact and a renewal of the vow he'd made 20 years earlier. I've always seen you, Nora, and I always will. As they stood together under the vast canopy of stars, their home warm and secure behind them, their children healthy and happy, their love as strong as the mountains surrounding Silver Reef, Nora Norton Ingram knew with absolute certainty that some rejections were, in fact, the greatest blessings of all.